The warehouse door slammed shut behind Marcus Chen as 30 leather-clad figures surrounded the makeshift ring, their engines still cooling in the parking lot outside. The underground fight club had seen plenty of blood, but nothing like what was about to unfold when the woman in the corner removed her hood, revealing the unmistakable face that had dominated headlines for years. Ronda Rousey stepped forward, her bare feet silent against the concrete, while the Crimson Serpents Motorcycle Club jeered and flexed their tattooed arms, completely unaware they were about to witness something that would be whispered about in every gym, bar, and street corner across the city for decades to come. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the converted warehouse, as Marcus checked his phone one last time. No signal. The Serpents had chosen this location deliberately, far from prying eyes and police interference. What they hadn't planned for was the woman who now stood in the center of their makeshift arena, rolling her shoulders with the casual confidence of someone who had faced down Olympic champions and UFC legends. If you're watching this unfold, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what happens next, and smash that hype button because this story is about to get absolutely insane. Tommy Razor Martinez, the club's president, spat tobacco juice into a rusty can and grinned, revealing gold teeth that caught the harsh light. He had orchestrated this entire evening as a message to the neighborhood, a demonstration of power that would cement the Serpents' control over the underground fighting circuit. The local gym owner who had refused to pay protection money sat tied to a chair in the corner, his swollen eye a testament to the club's persuasive methods. What Tommy didn't know was that the gym owner's daughter had made a desperate phone call 3 hours earlier, reaching out to the one person she knew could handle 30 men without breaking a sweat. Ronda's eyes swept across the circle of bikers, cataloguing their stances, their weapons, their tells. The brass knuckles on the tall one's right hand, the knife poorly concealed in the bearded one's boot. The way the youngest member kept shifting his weight, nervous energy betraying his inexperience. She had studied violence her entire life, first on the judo mats as a child, then in the octagon where millions watched her dismantle opponents with surgical precision. But this was different. This wasn't sport. This was survival, and the stakes had never been higher. The warehouse smelled of motor oil and stale beer, decades of illegal activities seeping into the concrete walls. Broken windows near the ceiling allowed slivers of moonlight to pierce the artificial illumination, creating a chiaroscuro effect that made the scene feel like something from a noir film. Marcus positioned himself near the exit, his camera phone ready despite the poor lighting. He had come here as a journalist, investigating the Serpents' expansion into legitimate businesses. But now he found himself documenting what might be the most extraordinary fight in underground history. Tommy stepped forward, his leather vest creaking with each movement. The patches on his jacket told the story of a man who had earned his reputation through violence and intimidation. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" His voice carried the gravelly tone of someone who had spent years shouting over motorcycle engines and bar fights. 30 against 1 ain't exactly fair odds. "Hurry!" The other bikers laughed, a sound that echoed off the warehouse walls like the growl of predators circling wounded prey. Ronda's response came not in words, but in movement. She shifted into a fighting stance, so fluid and natural it seemed like breathing, her feet finding perfect balance on the uneven concrete floor. Her hands remained relaxed at her sides, but every muscle in her body coiled with potential energy. The transformation was instantaneous and complete, like watching a house cat become a tiger. The laughter died in the bikers' throats as they recognized something primal and dangerous in her posture. The first attacker came from her left, a mountain of a man whose arms were thick as tree trunks and covered in tattoos that seemed to writhe in the flickering light. He swung a chain with the confidence of someone who had never met an opponent he couldn't intimidate. Ronda moved like water, flowing around his attack with such grace that for a moment it seemed like she had simply vanished. The chain whistled through empty air as she materialized behind him, her arms snaking around his throat in a rear, naked choke that had ended countless professional fights. The big man's eyes widened in shock as he felt his consciousness slipping away, his massive hands clawing uselessly at Ronda's forearm. She held the choke for exactly 3 seconds longer than necessary, ensuring he would stay down, then released him to crumple unconscious to the floor. The entire exchange had taken less than 10 seconds, but it sent a ripple of unease through the remaining 29 bikers. This wasn't going according to plan. Tommy's gold teeth disappeared behind pressed lips as he gestured to 3 more members. They approached cautiously now, having witnessed their largest member dispatched with surgical efficiency. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the unconscious man's labored breathing. Ronda stood perfectly still in the center of the ring, her chest rising and falling in the controlled rhythm of someone conserving energy for a long battle. The second wave attacked simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm her with numbers. A knife flashed toward her ribs, while brass knuckles aimed for her temple and steel-toed boots swept toward her legs. Ronda's response was a symphony of violence, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. She caught the knife hand and twisted, the blade clattering to the floor as its owner screamed and dropped to his knees with a dislocated shoulder. Her elbow found the brass knuckles wielder's solar plexus, doubling him over just in time for her knee to meet his descending face with a sickening crack. The third attacker's kick never reached its target. Ronda trapped his leg against her body and pivoted, using his own momentum to send him spinning through the air before he crashed into a stack of empty oil drums. The metallic clang echoed through the warehouse as the drums scattered across the floor, their hollow ringing like funeral bells for the biker's confidence. Marcus's hands shook as he tried to keep his phone steady, the camera struggling to capture the speed of Ronda's movements. He had covered wars and natural disasters, but nothing had prepared him for the clinical brutality unfolding before his eyes. Each of her techniques was executed with the precision of a surgeon and the power of a sledgehammer, leaving no doubt that she was operating on a completely different level than her opponents. The remaining bikers began to spread out, forming a wider circle, as they realized their numerical advantage meant nothing if they couldn't coordinate their attacks. Tommy's face had gone pale beneath his weathered tan, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool night air filtering through the broken windows. He had built his reputation on being the toughest man in any room, but watching Ronda dismantle his crew with such casual efficiency made him feel like a child playing with toys. A younger biker, his face still bearing the soft features of someone barely out of his teens, pulled a pistol from his waistband with trembling hands. The metallic click of the safety being disengaged cut through the warehouse like a blade, causing everyone to freeze. Ronda's eyes locked onto the weapon, calculating distance and angles with the same intensity she had once brought to Olympic competition. The gun represented a game changer, but her expression remained calm, almost serene. "Put it down, Jake." Tommy's voice cracked slightly as he spoke to the young man. "This ain't what we came here for." A D, but Jake's hands continued to shake, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger as adrenaline and fear clouded his judgment. The other bikers shifted nervously, suddenly aware that their evening of intimidation had spiraled completely out of control. Ronda took a single step forward, her movement so smooth it seemed like she was gliding across the concrete. "You don't want to do that," she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced down opponents in front of millions of viewers. "Put the gun down, and we can finish this the right way." Her words were calm, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath that made it clear she wasn't making a request. Jake's resolve crumbled under her steady gaze. The pistol slipped from his nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor, where it spun once before coming to rest against a concrete pillar. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the warehouse in suspended animation, and suddenly everyone was moving again. Tommy lunged forward, desperate to regain control of the situation, while his remaining crew members attacked from all sides in a final desperate gambit. What followed was a masterclass in combat efficiency that would be analyzed and debated by martial arts experts for years to come. Ronda moved through the attacking bikers like a force of nature, each technique flowing seamlessly into the next. An armbar here, a hip toss there, a perfectly timed uppercut that sent a 200-pound man flying backward into his companions. She used their own aggression against them, redirecting their energy and momentum until they were defeating themselves. The warehouse became a symphony of impacts. Bodies hitting concrete, the wet sound of fists connecting with flesh, the sharp crack of joints being hyperextended beyond their limits. Ronda's breathing remained controlled throughout, her movements economical and precise. She wasted no energy on flashy techniques or unnecessary brutality, instead focusing on the most efficient way to neutralize each threat as it presented itself. Marcus found himself backing toward the exit as the circle of conscious bikers grew smaller and smaller. His journalistic instincts warred with his survival instincts, the camera phone in his hands capturing footage that would either make his career or get him killed if the wrong people saw it. The story he had come here to write about organized crime and neighborhood intimidation had transformed into something far more extraordinary and dangerous. Tommy was among the last 5 standing, his gold teeth now stained with blood from a split lip. He circled Ronda warily, having watched her dismantle 25 of his crew members with techniques he had never seen outside of professional fighting. His leather vest hung open, revealing a chest tattoo that proclaimed him born to raise hell, but the irony was lost on him as he faced down a woman who seemed to have been born to end it. The warehouse lights flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows that made the scene even more surreal. Empty beer bottles and cigarette butts littered the floor between the unconscious bodies, evidence of the bikers' earlier confidence now seeming like artifacts from another era. The air hung thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and the metallic tang of fear that seemed to seep from the remaining conscious men. Ronda's sports bra was darkened with perspiration, but her breathing remained steady and controlled. A small cut above her left eyebrow leaked a thin trickle of blood, the only visible evidence that she had been in a fight at all. Her hands hung loose at her sides, ready to spring into action at the first sign of movement from her remaining opponents. The calm in her eyes was perhaps the most unnerving thing of all, suggesting that she could continue this pace indefinitely. The sound of sirens in the distance caused everyone to freeze. Someone had called the police, though whether it was a concerned neighbor or one of the bikers' own crew members seeking to end the carnage was unclear. Tommy's eyes darted toward the exits, calculating whether he could escape before the authorities arrived. The decision was made for him when Ronda stepped forward, her movement causing him to stumble backward in panic. "This ends now," she said, her voice cutting through the warehouse like a blade. "You and your crew are going to pack up and leave this neighborhood alone. The protection racket is over. The intimidation stops tonight." Her words carried the weight of absolute authority, backed up by the evidence of 25 unconscious bikers scattered across the concrete floor like broken dolls. Tommy's hand moved instinctively toward the knife at his belt, but stopped when he met Ronda's gaze. There was no anger there, no rage or bloodlust, just the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly how this would end if he chose to continue fighting. His hand fell back to his side as the last of his bravado crumbled away, leaving only a middle-aged man in leather who had finally met someone he couldn't intimidate. The sirens grew louder, their wailing echoing off the warehouse walls as red and blue lights began to flicker through the broken windows. Marcus made his decision, slipping out through a side door as the first police cars pulled into the parking lot. His footage would find its way to the internet within hours, spreading across social media platforms and news outlets like wildfire. The story of the night Ronda Rousey faced down 30 bikers would become legend, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But in that moment, as police officers flooded into the warehouse with weapons drawn and shouts of "Nobody move!" the reality was far simpler and more profound. A woman who had dedicated her life to the pursuit of excellence had used her skills to protect the innocent and stand up to bullies. The techniques she had perfected in dojos and octagon had found their truest purpose in a converted warehouse, defending those who couldn't defend themselves. The gym owner's daughter would later tell reporters that she had never doubted Ronda would come when she called. "She's not just a fighter," the young woman would say, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to the cameras. "She's a guardian angel who happens to know 30 different ways to choke someone unconscious." The quote would become one of the most shared sound bites in sports media history, cementing Ronda's reputation as something more than just an athlete. As the police sorted through the chaos, separating the unconscious from the conscious and trying to piece together what had happened, Tommy found himself in handcuffs for the first time in his adult life. The charges would be extensive: assault, kidnapping, extortion, and a dozen other crimes that would ensure the Crimson Serpent's reign of terror was permanently ended. But as he was led away to the patrol car, his eyes remained fixed on Ronda, who was calmly giving her statement to a detective. The warehouse would be sealed as a crime scene, but the story of what happened there would live on far beyond the investigation. Fight fans would debate the technical aspects of Ronda's performance, analyzing grainy cell phone footage frame by frame to understand how one person could so completely dominate 30 opponents. Self-defense instructors would use the incident as a teaching tool, demonstrating how proper technique and mental preparation could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Marcus's article, when it finally appeared 3 days later, would win a Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. But more importantly, it would inspire a new generation of young women to take up martial arts, seeing in Ronda's example proof that they could stand up to any bully, no matter how big or numerous. The ripple effects of that single night would spread far beyond the city limits, changing lives and perspectives across the country. The gym that had been targeted by the Serpents would reopen within a week, its owner's medical bills mysteriously paid by an anonymous benefactor. Enrollment would triple as word spread about what had happened, parents eager to sign their children up for classes taught by instructors who had been personally trained by the woman who had become a living legend. The neighborhood would transform from a place where people walked quickly with their heads down to a community where children played safely in the streets. Years later, when sports historians look back on Ronda Rousey's career, they would point to that night in the warehouse as the moment when she transcended athletics and became something larger. The techniques she had learned from her mother, refined through countless hours of training and perfected in professional competition, had found their ultimate expression not in a sanctioned bout, but in defense of the innocent. It was a reminder that true martial arts were never about conquest or domination, but about protection and justice. The last image Marcus captured before fleeing the warehouse would become iconic. Ronda standing alone in the center of the ring, surrounded by the evidence of her extraordinary performance, her face serene and her posture relaxed as if she had just finished a light training session rather than the most lopsided fight in underground history. The photo would grace magazine covers and inspire countless memes, but for those who were there that night, it would always represent something more profound than viral content. As you watch this story unfold, remember that each of us has the power to stand up against injustice, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to use whatever skills we possess in service of something greater than ourselves. The techniques may differ, the circumstances may vary, But the choice to act with courage and conviction remains constant across all our lives, waiting for the moment when we too might be called upon to step into the ring and fight for what's right.